Okay, you should have got a warning that we're recording.
Yeah. Okay, we're taking out. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Say
Sure.
about this, because otherwise we're wrong. Yeah.
So the idea is we need every locality, every region to really step up and think about harvesting the data, finding the sources that tell your own story. And that is something the House, I believe, is appreciated by talking about how we need to read our reality now, but also look back at our history, the how far we've come narrative, right? You guys have a narrative that goes back to at least, what is it, 1907, 1900, in terms of people visiting the area, actual people that you know, famous names. But that's just the beginning. You have to tell the story over that time. How has it changed? When did the events multiply? You know, there's a transition I think people can speak of when you have more than one meeting. You have so many meetings going on that no one person can go to them all. They're literally happening at the same time, right? That's a level of activity that a community can seek to become active at. And you're going to have to track that history over these events. Now, another aspect of history is that, like I said, you used to be able to depend on the fact that people told you things, and that's all you could know. So you'd look for your elders in the community and they'd say, I remember when we went to the 1973 conference and such, and that somebody was on stage and all this wonderful stuff happened. But these people have somewhat passed on already. And digitization of materials is happening, has been happening, and presents resources for you to be able to look up information. And I'm going to give you a little tour of that so that you can begin looking at your own stories and collecting the sources that will tell your story. Any questions before I dive into the process? Good? All right. All right. Share my screen. Shrink this. So if anybody has questions, you're going to have to tell me. I can't see anybody's face right now. So this is one of the places that will be very relevant for you guys in Washington. This is, and all the URLs for everything. I've already emailed Zabine the links for these things. So you're going to be able to follow them. Don't worry about paying attention to the URLs. The idea is you're just going to see what these different sites look like. You click on the links, you'll be able to get there. So this is a newspaper collection site that's based in Washington State, and it's searchable. And they have newspapers. So you might naively think, well, I'm just going to start with Baha'i. So you put in typical spelling for Baha'i, you click in, and you start seeing certainly some results. Now it's going to, most of these places start with a best match first, but we're interested in history. So we're going to go back and, oops, wait a second. 1855, we're talking about Baha'i? No, that's not right. This is Rio Grande, $1 million, something, $1,000. So this is something about Baha'i Brazil, right? Or someplace else in the world. So one of the things you're going to find out is you need to create a sort of mental library of things to search for. And one variation of that is fuller names of things with quotes. Hit return. So now you see some of these pages. I'm still doing oldest first, and now we're up to 1940, and it's a Baha'i Faith meeting, a public meeting, something those interested. So something's already happened. So this is clear, but this is also much later, right? 1940. So another variation, it's good to go ahead and collect all of these. You would click on a link, and then you'd see this highlighted section that's going to come up. I zoom in on it. So here's your public meeting at 1419 South Main Street, a group in Seattle which will have charge explaining the teachings. So it's just a meeting and address. Good to note the address. It's happening, looks like approximately weekly at 8 p.m. Okay, but we're 1940, so we've jumped way later. So we're going to back up and I'm going to show you another term. So very early on, instead of Baha'i faith being the typical reference, people would talk about the revelation. So the Baha'i revelation. And now you see we're back to 1909. So this is Mr. Remy coming to here. He's giving a talk at the First Universalist Church on the corner of Howard and Fifth. Okay. So this is a historic mark. We have 1909. That's useful information. You could add that to the list of events. Anything that somebody says in the room is fairly garbled. You have to really speak up for me to hear you.
Yes, that was, we have the 1909 Works Fair here, Stephen. So
Okay.
they
So
can
it's around
repeat
that time.
it.
Right, this was October 1909. So this is just the beginning. So then we're 1909 and then it jumps to 1990. So the term Baha'i revelation didn't last that long, right, in your newspapers. But interestingly enough, it comes back in 1990, 1995. So there's only a few hits, but you have to think about the variations of the terms that you're looking for, poking around, looking at things, and then seeing what you can find, and then start using what you found as your next search. So if I go back to this one here, so we're talking about the First Universalist Church on the corner of Howard and Fifth. Well, you could do a search on the First Universalist Church and then see what other, maybe some other meetings of theirs are of interesting, or the previous one that had the address. You could do a search for that address and then find what else is mentioned about that address. So you find some positive hits using Baha'i references, and then you use the information in the article to broaden your search. So you'll see names, you'll see addresses, sometimes you'll see phone numbers. These were all back in the day, 1930, 1940, 1950, but you'll start to see you have one bit of information and more information added. And then you just start building the chronology, right? You following what I'm saying? Okay, so there's Baha'i revelation, there's Baha'i faith, there's Baha'i world, because a variation of our name that was common for a while was the Baha'i world faith. That's another term you should get familiar with. And notice, by the way, in this particular website, I'm searching specifically for without the apostrophe, right? I go like this, you should see that, right? You see that there? But this search is bringing up both kinds of searches. So you don't have to worry too much here about the apostrophe. There are other places where you do have to be careful for each variation. But again, so Baha'i world will bring up both when we started to talk about Baha'i world faith, as in here, as well as you'll actually find references to other variations. And even the Baha'i world volumes, you'll see occasionally people actually mention the Baha'i world volume being donated to a library or something, or in this case, the Baha'i world community from 1988. So there are variations. And you could use just Baha'i as your search term, but you're going to have to clear out all the false positives. There's a city in Brazil called Baha'i. There's a type of grass called Baha'i grass. There's another city in, it's either Sudan or Chad, that's Baha'i. There are other kinds of misspellings of variations that were either the OCR was a mistake or the person typing it made a mistake actually spelling it. One of the variations for example, that you might think of or encounter is called a Baha'ist, which is actually very close to a Baptist. And you'll see those mixed up every now and then. But the basic approach is you start from the terms that you're most familiar with, you build those references, and then you start looking at other variations. So Baha'i, Baha'i faith, Baha'i world, Baha'i revelation, Baha'i property, Baha'i school, variations on that. And you just keep searching for and building out these references. You got to track down every time you click on one of these and you get the details, you have to write down the details of what this is, get your URL, save that, get the references of the details of what newspaper it's in, what page it's on, and the name of the article. And sometimes you'll see variations on what to pay attention to. Baha'i show answer. What is this one about? Somebody wrote, so Mabel Wilson Lazara wrote a letter to the editor, looks like, saying, Baha'i show answer. I have been watching the controversy that has been going on between the readers of Progress in their letters to the editor column over civil rights and communism. Frankly, I'm tired of it. Okay, so on and on they go. I attended a meeting of the Baha'i World Faith, and what a wonderful sense of integration these people have. Negroes and whites, so this is 1965, the terminology of the time, working together in a common cause. Their faith can make quite a positive impression to the person who's never really seen it before. So this is a letter to the editor, and that's worth noting. From the way I'm reading this isn't even a Baha'i. And she's interested at the time. Maybe she became a Baha'i soon. I don't know. You have to look in other records. But you can add this to the story of the history of your community. You know, a century in 2065, you could talk about Lazara being 100 years ago today, if you manage those details. So as a citizen journalist, you can pull these stories together. But one of the problems you're going to face is you can't get everything in one place, right? So I'm taking you to this Washington Digital Newspapers place, and there's more than 100 references that you're going to be able to ultimately pull, maybe 200 references. And though it is the whole state, you know, Seattle's probably got a pretty good chunk of that history going on. But you'll have to line them out. Maybe you'll find people coming from other places to Seattle, people from Seattle going other places. You'll see some exchanges going on. But this is all just one newspaper site. Well, another one is at the national level called Chronicling America. So the Library of Congress created a website based on the databases of newspapers that have been digitized. And they don't have the same collection as the state collections. So you separate yourself out for Washington. You can narrow down the years to a reasonable timeline. And it only goes up to 1963. And in an advanced section, I'm going to do that again here. Washington, all newspapers, 1900, 1963. Now you have a variation. I can search for a phrase like I was talking about Baha'i faith, right? Or other variations, and you can do a search for that. And again, I'm going to switch it to be by date. This place gives you thumbnails of these hits. And this is from 1940. Okay, so the Baha'i faith might pick up later terms. You can faintly see a little highlight down here, right down there. Even if you don't see the highlight, you can still get there. So I'm going to open this up in a new page. And here's that page of that newspaper. Somewhere on that page, it mentions Baha'i. I'm going to open up a PDF view of that page. And now I can actually do a search for Baha'i. And it will focus in to some part of that page. And if you're still not sure, just zoom in a bit, do your find again, and then you can see it more easily. So there's your article. And this is the one we saw before. Oh, let me do it this way. Right through there, Baha'i Faith Meeting from 1419 South Main Street. It's the same one, same entry, but not necessarily the same newspaper that we saw before. You have to track that information down on the page. So I know that this is, let me back up, sort of the bottom center of that page. And if I go back, this is the dynamic view of that page. I can zoom in. And then there's a little clipping icon here. And I can line that up, do clip, it opens up a new page. And this is the view. So you can download or print this page or save this page somehow. The URL here and the metadata, so the name of the newspaper, the date, time, and page is there. All of that information can be saved and added to your chronology that you're building out. And what I'm sure you'll find over time is that this address, 1419 South Main Street, was effectively a Baha'i center and ran for some number of years holding meetings. And many of the meetings will just have very basic information like this, but sometimes you're going to find speakers. You're going to find Ali Kuli Khan, Lewis Gregory, Thornton Chase, different eras, not necessarily that address. I'm just showing at this address, there will be general meetings, and then there will be special meetings where they're going to say names. And then, oh, okay, Ali Kuli Khan was there. Okay, Lewis Gregory was there. So then you can do a search for Lewis Gregory and Ali Kuli Khan, or not part of that name. So maybe Ali Kuli would be enough of the name that you could search for. So you don't, the longer the string that you make, the fewer the results, because they have to get every single character right in the rendering. But if you do a short, but not too short search, then you'll get your results and not have too many false positives and not miss things that you would have done with a longer string. So we have 2 websites so far. We've got this Washington State collection, and every state will have a collection. You get good at your own state collection, and then you should look at neighboring states, like, for example, Oregon, because there are people that would go from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, and there would be people from Seattle that went to Portland, Oregon, right? Or even down to California for the Geyserville Baha'i School, which is the school that was there for a long time back to the 1920s. So you'll find those people like Ida Finch or George Latimer showing up at other places. And then you'll see them come to your place and you'll see this exchange going on. For example, there was a national convention in San Francisco, and that increased the number of people on the West Coast that went to attend their national convention. And then people who went to the national convention came back to your area, Seattle, to give extra talks. And you'll be able to map some of that exchange going on as you build up these sources. So we've got the state collection, we have Chronicling America. Now we have newspapers.com, which people tend to speak of more generally. The advantage of newspapers.com is that they tend to pull everything together in one place. So you have a whole nation worth of newspapers in one place, and longer than the Chronicling America may go. So you have to pay for this. So someone, I believe Zabina's got one through Unity, your Unity Museum, where there's a subscription. So someone could go into that place, and if you have a public computer or something set up, or work with people about using this account, you can do some searches in there. And I'm going to do a quick search for Lewis Gregory, but I'm going to specify that I'm going for, I'll try Seattle. Let's see if it shows up for Seattle specifically. So is Lewis Gregory ever mentioned in Seattle? Yes, okay, and again, the sort starts best match. I'm gonna go for old. Okay, so here's an article that I've already clipped once. Louis Gregory of Washington, D.C. will give a course of free lectures on the Baha'i Revelation. Tuesday, noon, 8 p.m. Wednesday, noon, 8 p.m. Oh, went too far. Thursday, let me highlight some of these. Thursday, noon, Thursday, 8 p.m. Friday, noon, Friday, 8 p.m. Saturday, 2 p.m. So 8 p.m. Saturday noon, 8 p.m. Sunday, 2 p.m. evening, Sunday evening again on another day, no, same day, 6 p.m. and 7:15. He went to two places within an hour and a half. Two different places. He went to the YWCA and then he went to the Methodist Church on 14th near Madison. And then he went to still a third place that evening. He went to Mount Zion Baptist Church, corner of 15th and Madison. And then he was there Monday, twice, Tuesday. So he was there Tuesday to Tuesday. He was there a week. Did anybody there know that Louis Gregory had given a week's worth of talks in Seattle in 1922?
1922.
So what else happened in January 1922? I don't know. This is the process of learning history. So this is a year after the passing, actually, wait, no, Abdul Baha passed in November of 1921. So this was when Shoghi Effendi was announced as the guardian. Same month, Shoghi Effendi was announced to the Baha'i world as the guardian. Louis Gregory is in Seattle. He's getting the news of the guardianship the same time as he's giving talks in Seattle. If you're
David, I'll tell you what it is.
All the connections between the years of the one that's not being pointed out is after what all people happened after a global pandemic. And so it's not, I don't know when that pandemic stopped, but we have the
This is World War I. End of World War I. So we're just in a complex situation here, and what's happening with the Baha'i community is starting to explode in Seattle.
But this is that where the connected issues with how we're dealing with like
1918 to 22, right?
Yeah.
So this is why we need to put things in perspective. And this is not so much what we're going to show you the research.
Okay.
But our group, what we are going to do is take Spanish flu, World War I, Louis Gregory, Barbara Roberts, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this is going to be our work.
Okay.
As a group. When we get together, that's when we go and get into the story.
Beautiful.
Got it? But we need to know if we don't know that Louis Gregory was roaming around here, we don't have much of the story, do we?
Yeah.
So now it's developing, right? The story is coming together.
Right.
Thank you, Stephen.
So I'm helping you with doing some of the clipping, and once I have clipped something, it's actually public. So you guys can hit this directly if you just get the URL, or if you're in newspapers.com and looking around. If I back up here, see the fact that this looks different here. We've got something that looks like a thumbnail of some newspaper, and it's actually Louis B. Gregory, not Louis G. Gregory. That's the wrong Gregory. But this is an existing clipping. So anytime something's already been clipped, you don't have to clip it again. You can if you want. There's a process. It's not hard to do that. So you can add it to your own collection, or you can just click on it and use the URL, and it's public anyway. But we can go others here. So here we've got one from 1939, and this one's not clipped yet. So I can click on this one. Where are we at? Let me shrink this back down. Oh, here it is. School teacher. Oh, this is the wrong one. This is somebody else. science teacher from Menalius, New York. So that's not in. Go back. So that might be it. However, I want you to think about something. A lot of things are passed around by word of mouth. Is there an alternative spelling of Lewis?
That's
Lewis,
Louis Gregory
right?
alone.
Right? Lewis Gregory. There is another spelling of Lewis. So the question is, does that show up anything? Oh yeah, well, it's another, this is a Lewis E. Gregory. Okay, so that's probably not our Lewis Gregory. But you have to think about misspellings. You have to think about variations in spellings. You have to think about alternative terms like Baha'i faith, Baha'i world faith, Baha'i revelation, Baha'i world, Baha'i properties, so that you can get a broader hit selection of what you're looking for. And then once you've got these, I'm going to bring up a different document. I think I still have it down here. Let's see, downloads. I think I deleted it. I had assembled a oh, here's Lewis Gregory. So this is a clipping collection of Lewis Gregory, and I've got Lewis Gregory mentioned in some newspaper articles going back some time earlier, and then some other people who knew him. Here's a case of a Lewis Gregory, spelled the wrong way. Lewis G. Gregory, committee consisting of Theodore Lewis Gregory and a United States postage stamp agent yesterday asked President Roosevelt to present diplomas to the graduating class of the Law School of Howard University. So this is when Lewis Gregory graduated from Howard University with his law degree. And he's on a committee that asked the president to hand out the diplomas, but they spelled his name wrong. So there's things to look at and learn about these things. Again, variations in spellings are something you're going to have to pay attention to get the right answers of things. So there's another category. So there's looking at non-Baha'i sources for mentions of the Baha'i. So when the Baha'is tried to get something in the newspaper that we're having meetings, when we had a speaker come, when a Baha'i died and his sort of obituary is mentioned, and it may say that he's a Baha'i right in the article. There's all of that stuff. And then there's different places you can look for these kinds of articles, right? Different places that you'll have to be able to access to find these informations, sources, pull them together. There's another category of things that you need to look at. There is one other place called Genealogy Bank. It's another subscription-based place. I won't show it. It's the same basic idea. It's a collection of newspapers. I don't think it's especially relevant for Seattle, but it is relevant for other places. So Portland, Oregon turns out to have a collection in here, for example. But I won't show that one this time. But I'm talking about all these non-Baha'i sources. Are there Baha'i sources that you can look up? Absolutely. You would know your publications, perhaps, Star of the West, Baha'i News, National Baha'i Review, American Baha'i. A lot of these publications that the Baha'is have put out are now collected at this website called Baha'i.works. And they've got a statement in here somewhere from the National Assembly. They have permission to share these things, and you can now look at them. So here's periodicals. There's also pamphlets, compilations, booklets, some books, audiobooks, but periodicals. So here's Star of the West. So I'm going to open up a new page with Star of the West. And before, what we did was searched for variations of Baha'i. Well, this is a Baha'i periodical. What we want to look for are Seattle. And again, I'm going to switch it from relevant to sort of time ordered. If I do a creation date of the product, all these products, when he got a pile of newspapers or Baha'i News or whatever, he scanned them in order. So most of the time, unless he had to fix something, These are going to show up in order from newest at the top to oldest at the bottom. And I'm going to go to 500 clippings. And here we've got first mention of Seattle in Star of the West was in volume 2, issue 1. And now I'm going to do a search down the page because this is a text section I can type. Seattle. All right, so here's an article on Seattle. So there's the page. Seattle, Washington. All right, across there. Seattle, Washington, in addition to the regular Sunday meetings held at 2916 Beacon Avenue South, you got an address. You could actually search in the newspapers for 2916. Say it again.
That's what we're talking about, get the addresses.
Right, so harvest this information. You've got to write down the URLs and the details, so you back up. So this is news from the Occident, continued from page 9, Star of the West. You'd copy the URL. If you back up 2 steps, I had that section, I was in the previous here. Yeah, so this was volume 2, issue number 1. So you can collect the metadata of the reference, and then you actually mine the entry, and it's by Ida Finch, right?
Yep.
She wrote it. We got an address. We've got a speaker. So here's your address, Beacon Avenue South. We've got Dr. Lothrop of 21 People's Bank Building in his office. So Dr. Lothrop is hosting the meeting in his office in the bank building. That's information you can tuck away and use somewhere else. Then you have the actual speaker, Mrs. Emma Harmon, a Baha'i sister from North Bend, Oregon. So somebody from Oregon was your speaker. And Lydia Rainey from North Yakima, a few days resulting in stronger, they came and talked and spent a week in the city, and Baha'is were coming together because you had guests in town, right? So there's a dynamic going on there. You've got inter-community activities and people coming together.
So
So
the
that
first
part-
assembly, it goes to Yakima, and Dr. Lathrop dies during when we had the flu. He dies unexpectedly in his 30s. Yeah.
Excellent. So you already have some sources talking about some of these people. So Dr. Lothrop was not only a doctor who had an office in the bank building, apparently he was a Baha'i, right? You've got that information. So you can pull this information together and you start telling the story. So here we are in, what was this, 1907?
Forming. When we first formed, they started to teach right away. Downtown, near Hyde Market, Rule, right there.
This is 1911.
Well, after Baha'i.
So, and this is just when it was published, so the news would have been of the previous month or something. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got the non-Baha'i sources that you have to gather and form that sort of tabulation of events and activities. And you have the Baha'i sources that you have to go back to and search for. So here's Star of the West. Down here, there's Baha'i News. The American Baha'i is a little skimpy and only from 1970. But Baha'i News, if I go back here, Baha'i News goes from 1924 to 1990. So that covers a lot. And then Star of the West goes from 1910 to 1935. So you're going to have this serial of overlapping Baha'i sources that you have to search for Seattle. And then once you've got a name, again, you got to search for that name to see what else that person did. They might have moved from Seattle. Maybe they pioneered somewhere, or a relative of theirs pioneered somewhere, and the relationship is mentioned somewhere else. You can look for the address, you can look for the phone number, that kind of thing. So you've got non-Baha'i sources, you've got Baha'i sources. You've got general search terms, Baha'i faith, Baha'i world, but then you find more information, and then you can start searching for that more particular information, and you might see more hits. So for example, at 1419 South Bend, whatever street it was, what was it before it was a Baha'i center? Was the building brand new? Was it a pre-existing and did some other purpose? So when did it start? So you look for that address and you search back in time further. Oh, and then you go forward again. Oh, here's where the Baha'i meeting started. Okay, I hit this one meeting in 1920, but it turns out it was used in 1909, just to make something up. You can push it back and then find more information going forward. And what was it before it was a Baha'i center? And then when did the Baha'i stop using it? Then they stopped and moved on to something else. Maybe you'll see an endpoint. Maybe a car dealership started there or something. And you'll know that, okay, there's the whole time that it was a Baha'i center. And then the Baha'i center moved somewhere else, or they, stopped for a couple of years, maybe during the Depression, and then started up somewhere else. And you can track that over time. Am I making sense?
Yeah, can you punch in Queen Maria of Romania in Seattle?
Yes, let's go back in here.
We do history link in Seattle, right? So we get a lot of information out of it.
So one clue is that I did not put this in quotes, and therefore I've got thousands of hits. So anytime, if I didn't put it in quotes, the idea is both words occur on the page somewhere. So there's Queen and there's Marie, so that doesn't get us very far. So let's try with the quotes.
Queen Maria of Romania, Seattle.
Queen Marie Antoinette. I don't know, is Queen Marie Antoinette the same person? And then Queen Marie Henrietta.
No. If you punch
Oh,
in
maybe,
Seattle,
well, this one is the state. This is Washington State, but maybe if I put in Romania.
yeah, the next Seattle.
Okay, so 1920 and 1930. She's mentioned in Seattle. Now let's see what these are.
Seattle Star. She meets with the first female mayor in Seattle.
Queen Marie of Romania, according to the Paris Dispatch, is coming to America in October, where she plans to take part in a movie film, proceeds to do charity. So you'd have to look up the biography. So this is not her literally coming to Seattle. It's her traveling back to America, but she's mentioned in Seattle. Here's another one.
Seattle, and she has her own train with her children.
Rules for visiting queens laid down by writer. Women's Home Organization. Her first call upon, so somebody wrote about visiting her. Where did she visit her? I don't know. You're gonna have to read the article.
Yeah, and we've got a whole class of Queen Maria of Romania in Seattle going in here. So this is just to show you that we can, use the local papers. And we're going to add history link to that also. They talk all about her in Seattle.
You're going to become the experts on the Baha'i faith in Seattle. You're going to know the relationships, the series of speakers, when there was a bunch of people at one time doing a project, or a person who spent a week or a month or several months in your location, giving a variety of talks. And remember that Louis Gregory list, those were the public talks, and they were like noon and 8 p.m. So what was he doing before and after? I'm sure local Baha'is would have been having breakfast with him, having afternoon tea with him. He would have to have some rest. And then he would have a dinner with, an invited dinner. Certain people would get together. Well, who would those people? Maybe you'll find some of those answers in your archives if your assembly is open to having that investigated. But this is just the beginning of the search. You start looking, people tend to imagine that we have these books and people say, okay, here's history and we're done. Everything's been figured out. And I'm here to tell you, no, it has not all been figured out. You guys didn't know that Louis Gregory gave a week of talks in 1922, in January 1922, in your own town. And there's nothing special about me that I'm like magically capable of doing these things. Any one of us can do these things. It's just no one has looked before. You need to look. I cannot cover the 50,000 big cities in the United States. I can't do it. So please, you have to do it.
That's why we are forming the Washington State Newspaper Highland Joint Association. So we can have Yakima, and North Bend and how we're all traveling. And so we get an idea of what is, what really has been going on.
And there it is in Facebook. So you got a group so you can talk with each other about it, share your discoveries, announce meetings if you're going to have a meeting at some point. I hear Zabine saying that she's talking about holding regular meetings of the group, have a public meeting, talk about your history, find the local historians association, your general society history group. I'm sure there's going to be a club or an association of some kind, maybe even a journal. Maybe you can write about your history, and maybe you can work with the assembly and get an article published in the local journal, something like that. There's a lot out there. One last category of information. We talked about non-Baha'i publications, newspapers, and then there's Baha'i publications. Sometimes when you really want to focus on a person, there's a third category of things, and I've kind of mentioned it a little bit. Genealogical sources, birth certificates, death certificates, census records.
Military records.
Right, that kind of thing. Many of you will be familiar with Ancestry.com. It's very famous. You can do DNA tests, and then there's kinds of resources that they give. Ancestry is probably the state of the art in terms of access to genealogical sources. However, it's not free. It's pretty expensive. And it's hard to share anything, actually. Their business model assumes you have subscribers who then want to share with each other. And so an individual subscriber can search for things, but it turns out they're part of a family tree. Here's another person that accesses the same family tree. And then Ancestry charges you a little more so that these two can talk to each other and share that family tree. Well, so the business model is you're going to spend more money and more money and more money. Family Search has most of the same sources as Ancestry. They're actually an umbrella underneath Ancestry where they provide free access to some of the more common sources. So all of the census sources, some of the passport applications people filled out, some death certificates, birth certificates, some of that kind of stuff sometimes shows up in here. And then all you have to do is sign up. You don't have to, there's no pay. And then you'd have to put in your credentials. Mine's already cached in there. And you do a search. And let's do a search for Ida Finch. What's Ida's birth year, Zabine?
She died in 41. Let me see, 1897, she moved to Seattle. Oh my God, I'm sorry, I don't have it in my head ready to
Okay,
go.
well, all right, let's put in 1941 for her death date. Actually, I'm gonna put it in there, more options,
December.
right? I don't think they usually care about the month. They usually just worry about getting the year right. And she died in Seattle, you think?
She died in Monroe, but she's buried in Seattle.
So let's put in Seattle and see what happens. Seattle, Washington, 1941. And when you're uncertain, you would stretch out these years a little bit.
Sometimes they do 42.
Yeah.
I said 42, don't ask me why.
And now we got to find the right Ida Finch out of this information. So is she Ida A. Finch?
Yes, yes.
Aha, so this might be her then. And this is an obituary. So
Okay,
it does say January 43. That's pretty late.
it is January, you're right, go for it.
All right. Your record.
There it is.
This is, wait, no, this is the District of Columbia. So even though I put in Seattle, it shows me others, but there are some Ida.
Seattle,
Oh, was it Seattle? Oh,
yeah,
wait,
it's Prairie of Seattle.
oh yeah, burial place, Seattle. All right, so
Yeah.
yeah, it could be her. Now this is an obituary.
Could be in a different community maybe, huh?
This is a publication in DC. This is not the actual thing, but the Evening Star newspaper in DC, which, by the way, I think is a black
So
newspaper.
they wrote it up over there too.
So she was mentioned in Washington, DC, a couple of years after she died, if she died in 1941. So that would be a data point to collect.
Yeah,
Let's see what this one is.
yeah.
That'll-
Talking about it.
Oh, this is a phone book. You remember the phone books? We don't have phone books anymore. We used to have phone books and you'd have addresses, right?
Yeah,
You'd have an entry in a phone book somewhere. What do we got here? Ida Finch, F-I-N, Finch, Henry, Helen, Ida. Is that her?
actually one with Ida Finch in it.
Embroidery. Mrs. Ida Finch, a teacher, Wilson's Dancing Academy and Embroidery, 524 Pacific. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
So in 1900, I think this is. It looks like
Hey,
it was
you
listed.
got a phone book right there, see it? And Ida Finch is right in it.
Yep, she's in the phone book. So you could again write down, and the URLs for this are free, but you still have to register to see it. So you can use it in a source compilation. You're getting all this information pulled together. You can reference the URL and just say in brackets, registration required, something like that. And you can build up a history of this person to some degree. There are some limitations in family search. Again, their assumption is you're building a family tree, so you can't make an entry for this person and build all the sources inside family search until it turns out they have a family tree relationship somewhere. But you can collect all of these references and put them outside family search and point people back to family search and just say registration required. But here you have a 1910 census record. So she would have been a Baha'i at this point.
Yeah, 0507, right? 07 is when she said in 07 when she became a local assembly member forming it, she was a Baha'i since just about a year. So
Right.
06,
So here's the census record. She was living on Beacon Avenue.
yeah, there you go.
There's the address and the various forms. So the first number, if you can't tell what what it is, you go to the top of the column, and then you got to zoom in. Oop, let's say. So that's the house number as it was then.
That's so cool. Everything is well.
She's there with her husband, John A., Ida, and John Jr. When they got married, because they've been married 30 years. So if this is 1910, they've been married for 30 years. So that was, or maybe that's 30 years old. You have to look at the column heading if we're not sure.
They're right here in 1970.
Number of years of present marriage. So they've been married 30 years, as my first guess. So they got married in about 30 years before 1910, 1880.
Brooklyn first.
And these numbers are plus or minus a year because you're doing it during the year. So they don't give you an actual date, they just tell you the year. She was from Pennsylvania. He was from Connecticut, so they both moved out there. And then it tells you a little bit about the parents. So the parents of John were also from Connecticut. The parents of Ida were not from Pennsylvania, all of them. One of them is from New Hampshire. One of them is from Pennsylvania. And then he's on own income. So he's his own business manager. He's got his own business. And technically, she's unemployed.
The shop, they remember that
Right.
was
So
the
You
shop.
you connect this information with other information you know, and then you can go from there. Now, John Jr., oh, he was born in Texas. Interesting.
Means Ida went to Texas the other day.
He was 19 years old, I think this is. Yep, looks like 19 years old. So 19 years ago, before 1910, the Finches were living in Texas.
Okay. This is how you can pull things together.
And what is this? Shim? I don't know what that says. Maybe a shoemaker? And he was living in the house. Oh no, that's the next person over. He's here. Oh no, that's the father, that's the wife, and that's the son. So he was a shoemaker or a shingler. Maybe that's a shingler, making someone working on roofs. That makes sense, a shingler. Working in house repairs. Yeah. So then you again have to look up all these columns and what they mean, but you get some basic ideas, and you can do the 1910 census, the 1920 census, and up to 1950. 50 is being worked on right now these days.
You know, Stephen, you are, so it's 1:55, and I know I don't want to overburden you. And so we do have 5 more minutes with Stephen. This is where we can.
Questions?
The way we can ask some questions, or I know Stephen will be kind enough if we ever get desperate, he'll come back and work with us in the group when we get into some real work.
And I'm a member of your Facebook group, so you can ask questions in there too.
Remember the Washington Baha'i Historic Association, and he's going to be monitoring, you know, what we're doing and what we're needing, and he's been so good helping us. We have all the sites, all the email addresses, we have them available, okay? We
And
sent
she's
earlier
got
on.
email files that have the links for things and a little sort of guidelines and beginning ideas about how to do things, but you've heard it here.
Do you have any questions for Stephen that you're sort of thinking, wow, this is overwhelming, but now what? I think it will be nice to have a workshop. Follow up, that's exactly right. You know, I think it's right? That's what we're gonna do from here on forward, right? So this is what we call the mini conferences, right, mini gatherings. And theme 2, this is what we're going to be doing, is theme 2 follow-up, getting into the last 100 years, as they said, right, in our community. So when you hear us talking about the theme 2 gathering, you know that's what we're going to do. And we're going to maybe start with Charlie Dillon or Ida Finn. We'll have to know this, and we'll learn how to actually make it happen. And we'll do it on the, you know, on the big screen. And you know, Stephen, this has been really, even for somebody not exactly new, but reasonably new to this, new science of family search or our heritage search. It's really amazing what we can find out. And
you in Seattle can do something I cannot do. You can go visit these addresses and take pictures of them. What are they today? Where did Louis Gregory stand and talk? You can take a picture of that place. I can't.
Yeah.
It's an organization that goes along.
Washington State Baha'i Historians Association.
And the link is in the file that she can email you out. So if you want to click on something to get there, there's a link in the file.
On our Facebook page, we're going to put these links there, so you can just go onto our Facebook page. We don't have a website, but we have a Facebook page. Okay, we have it already. And so, do you have any questions for Stephen? Was this helpful? Was it interesting?
Very good.
Very. Yeah, she had 8 dozen. We're forming it in North Carolina has one. What's it, where is Burton? Burton is in
Burton's Lansing, Michigan. He's working in
Michigan.
Lansing, Michigan. If somebody gets really fired up about this, we also have a nationwide association that we're putting together, the Baha'i Historians Association.
just by itself, and we're under that.
And we're pulling all the people who are really want to do the research into that group. The state group is really for people who want to do the research and talk about that state, is for that group. The national group is more just, how do we help each other? What did you learn? Oh, I learned how to do this. Oh, there's this other collection over here I didn't know about, that kind of.
Authors who are writing books on, let's say Ida Finch or whatever it is, wow, somebody's an expert, and and then that person went everywhere. So we have authors and researchers and so on. That's a technical and the scholarly team and the overall one. And then we're going to go to Washington State, is where we have the local history.
And if you know other people in other states, basically every state, we need this kind of activity starting up. So you can connect people in other states to this kind of work and this kind of activity, and we will encourage them too.
Last question, what was that Facebook group called?
Washington State Baha'i Historians Association.
That's the Facebook group.
That's the Facebook group.
It's WA, just WA, doesn't say Washington.
Oh, I'm sorry.
WA.
I forgot to do it, yeah. I forgot what I did.
Put it back up on the screen.
WA State. Baha'i
There it is.
Well, Stephen, this was really fun. No, and then I want to tell Stephen that it can step be part of that. So the mother group, let's call it that, or the father group, right? They meet every Thursday at 1:00 on Zoom. And there's only a small group of people, so don't think it's a big group, right? But more and more states are sort of starting to send their people into there. Then every Thursday, that's at 1:00, but every Thursday at 1:00, we have out of Germany that we're also attending a regular Baha'i historians, and what they've been doing, they're taking families off or eyewitnesses to handle the cause and their history. And so they're repeating something like Ruhia Kanu and
William Sears.
And William Sears, these stories, they're the family members talking, how they were little kids when those seas arrived in Africa, and that they remember being, these stories are mind-boggling, and the photographs that go with it. So Washington at 11, we go international. They come in from Europe, from Africa, they come in from all over, right? With their hands.
And then hopefully soon we'll be attending your meeting where you talk about your areas and the things that you have found about things that we all need to know.
Right, and that's been real, and that's every week. So that German group, and so it's our time is actually it's 10:00. They switched it to 10:00.
Right.
So Thursday morning, 10:00, if you're at home and you can. But the cool thing is that there's so often family members who recall when they were traveling with their parents who were hands at that time. It's very touching, it's very personal, it's really unbelievable, honestly. So I think Baha'i history, especially with theme two having chosen by the House to stay on the agenda for the conferences, for the gatherings, I think Seattle has made up its mind, we're going to be part of that. We're not going to let the dead bury the dead. We are going to unbury all of our names and faces, and they're all going to be part of whose shoulders we're standing on. And Stephen, I'm so thankful to you. And I know you and I kind of, you did Wikipedia, and then we stumbled, and then we did that, and the next thing we did that, and then Rob Stockman joined it. The next thing is just timing is just right this time. So
I'm going to stop recording now, but we don't have to end the meeting just yet.
okay.
So bye-bye to the people we're recording.